Mino Line Media presents the Business First Podcast.
Hi, all, and welcome to a new episode of Business First with Sonia Alleyne. I am your host, and today I am excited to introduce you to Dave Wooley, who is a director, a producer, an author, and serial entrepreneur. So there's going to be a lot for us to talk about. But what you should know and what you should definitely go check out is his recent production, Dionne Warwick, Don't Make Me Over, the documentary that is now on Max/HBO. It's officially Max right now, isn't it, Dave?
That's correct.
Welcome to the studio. Thank you for being here.
A pleasure. Thank you. I've been looking forward to this. Congratulations on all this as well.
Thank you. Thank you. And I wanted to congratulate you on your honorary doctorate from, is it Huron University?
Yeah, there it is.
So congratulations on that. Oh, very good. Very good. Very good. First of all, thank you very much for making this documentary. I got a chance to see it. There was a lot that I learned. I love musical documentaries. And the only one that I remember seeing that included Dionne Warwick was one on Burt Bacharach that American Masters had done. So to see this and to see who she was, I've also seen her. She did a one-woman performance. It might have been like 15, 20 years ago that I also got to see. But this was jam-packed with great information. You had everybody in the business there, including President Clinton and so many people she had worked with, so many people who admired her, and some people who are no longer with us, Olivia Newton-John. So when did you start working on this documentary, and when did it actually premiere on, I believe it was on CNN?
Well, let me go back a little further, if you don't mind. You know, the genesis of the documentary came when Dionne and I finished her autobiography. I'm the co-author of her autobiography, which is titled My Life as I See It. And, you know, when we finished that back in like maybe 2010, you know, it was in my mind, it's like at some point, there's just too many fabulous anecdotes in this story, in this book. And, you know, especially today's youth, they don't read books. You know, I mean, what's a library? What's a library card? They have no idea.
Yeah.
So, you know, I took it on a personal mission to somehow try to figure out how to bring this book to the big screen. But the process took about 5 years. You know, once we started production, it took 5 years. And you look at as you mentioned, the galaxies of stars that are throughout the film, and you can understand why. I think it has to be the only documentary that has a Snoop Dogg and a President Clinton in the same film, and it works.
And it absolutely works. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that's part of the genius you bring to all of the projects you have, is that you've had an opportunity to work with all of the greats, the legendary greats. And I have a list of them here, like Tony Bennett and Elton John, James Brown, Carlos Santana. But you've also had an opportunity to see hip hop like emerge and work with Queen Latifah and Snoop Dogg and Alicia Keys. And so you've had the benefit of really two dynamic musical worlds. And so what has that been like for you transitioning into these new eras, and just some of the great experiences that you've had and some of the great music that and the great projects that you've had the opportunity to produce?
You know, it feels very natural. I grew up in this era. You know, I grew up in Harlem, born and raised, right up the road from the Bronx where hip hop was created. So, you know, I was a part of those early days of watching the MCs in parks, you know, long before it was even called hip hop, watching them rap to records, et cetera, just growing up in that environment in the projects. You know, I grew up in Douglas Projects, and I went to school on 124th and Lenox, a private school called Rice High School. And then in the early days, I started off as a musician. You know, I was a studio drummer. So I played on a couple of those hip hop, you know, even some Grandmaster Flash records, you know, as a drummer. That's when they were sampling. That's when they actually used real drummers. And we would go in the studio, and I remember Flash singing the beat to me, boom, that, boom, that, boom, boom, that, boom, that. And I was, okay, I got it. Now I played on the drums, and then he rap, you know, and they rap on top of it. So I was there at the genesis, and, you know, when it really started at the beginning of this. So to be involved in this era at this point, you know, it feels very comfortable. It feels like, you know, family. It feels like, you know, it feels very natural. What I'm impressed is how it's become so global, and how it has taken off. But, that's African-American culture. I mean, some of the greatest creative people on the planet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things I found fascinating about your story in another interview, you talked about you had this entrepreneurial drive at a very, very young age. And, and when you when you were, honored with this doctorate degree not too long ago, in your acceptance speech, you talked about the importance of young people opening these doors of opportunities when they're presented to them. And that if you could do it, right, you felt that anyone could do it. But this 9-year-old who started, selling newspapers and buying grocery carts, and I want you to talk about that, and employing people at 9 years old, like, where did that come from? That doesn't sound like somebody who was hoping to open up doors. It's almost like you understood at a very young age that everything was already open to you, and that you just had to, you just had to engage, or you just had to take it, or you just had to move forward. And so what nurtured that spirit at 9 years old in Harlem in the project?
Well, what I said is you have to believe young people. I mean, even parents, you have to believe in the impossible. That's the first thing, because it all starts from up here. It's only impossible until somebody does it. And then when somebody does it, they say, brilliant, genius, wow, how come I didn't think of that? So you have to believe in that. That's where it starts from. But at 9 years old, I grew up in a single projects, parent house in the projects in Harlem, as I mentioned earlier. My mother didn't have a lot of money, so I wanted to go to see the, latest Bruce Lee movies and have the latest Converse and, all of the things that people were wearing in our community. But we didn't have that kind of disposable income. So on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, my boys and I used to go down to a local supermarket called the A&P. And what we would do is carry groceries, for the elderly ladies who needed help. We would hang out there in the corner. And, I was a little guy, so I remember just thinking like, man, I can only carry one bag at a time. So I wasn't getting much business. But I saw a shopping cart in the store. It was up on the wall. It was $25. And I remember saving up all my little 50-cent tips, 25-cent tips, until I got $25, and I bought that shopping cart. So now when women came out, it's 10 dudes lined up, I was the only one out there with a shopping cart. So I had a competitive advantage over my competitors. And now I noticed that my tips were from 50 cents to $1. So long story short, I ended up saving those dollars and bought a second shopping cart. And before the summer was over, I had 5 shopping carts. And what I did was I let each one of my little boys use my shopping cart. But the deal was we had to split 50-50, since it's my shopping cart. None of them thought to buy their own shopping cart. They didn't have a problem at the end of the day splitting with me. But what that taught me was the difference between being an employer versus being an employee. And I have to say that God has blessed me, because from that very moment on at 9 years old to today, I have never worked for anybody full time in my life at all. I've been an entrepreneur my entire life, and I've been able to, obviously provide for my family. I have a daughter who's Dave Wooley, who's now an attorney. She's 27 years old, graduated from Drexel University Law School. My other daughter graduated from Georgia Tech. She has a master's degree. She's 26 years old, and she's a computer engineer. Her name is Dionne Warwick. Both of them, by the way, were associate producers on this film with me. So I'm a girl dad, if you know what I mean. But that's where entrepreneurship came from. And, once you start making your own money, you just realize, I can make my own money, and you just have no fear, and that's how it's been for me. I've been very blessed.
Yeah. So no doubt that those early lessons are what helped make you successful in the music business, a business that's notorious for people thinking more creatively about their possible outcomes than thinking hardcore business. And so what lessons have you had to impart to, I know you mentor a lot of young people. What are some of the lessons that you have imparted based on some of the experiences that you've had and what you know is true about business?
Well, the first thing I would tell folks is you got to read, you have to learn the principles of business. It didn't come to me naturally. I did go to college. I do have a BBA in business management. I also have an MBA and from both from Wilmington University here in Delaware. And then, as you just mentioned, been blessed last year to December to receive the honorary doctorate degree. So, I learned the fundamentals. So what I ended up doing was, a lot of times people ask me, like what business school did I go to, and all of this kind. So I tell them I went to UCLA. They say, oh, UCLA, California. I said, no, the University on the corner of Lenox Avenue. I'm like, what? Right there in Harlem, that's where you really learn entrepreneurship. So I ended up putting my street knowledge with my academic knowledge and fusing the two of them together. And this is what you have today. Because, there's a difference between being intelligent and being educated. And I'll take an intelligent person over an educated person anyway, because an intelligent person is going to figure it out. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about, figuring it out. Having the book knowledge helps, but, you still have to be able to figure it out.
So you authored this book in 2010. Is that something that you had always wanted to do? I imagine that was your first book. You had been working in music, and of course you understood, but they're two very different talents. Writing a book that is going to keep people engaged is a very different talent than music that you produce or even video. And so you've been able to have success in all three areas. And what is it and they require three distinct skill sets. What is it about you that you think that has been able to translate into all of these different areas?
I believe in myself. I believe in myself. The man in me is the God in me. So if I say I'm going to do something, I know what level I'm going to do it on. The other thing I've tried to do throughout my career is not repeat myself. So prior to Dionne's autobiography, we did a children's book, which is a whole nother skill set. And that book is called Say a Little Prayer. And it's about Dionne as a little girl growing up and performing at the Apollo Theater, Little D as we call her. And she said, hey, Dave, why don't we do a book on you? So we did another children's book, which is called Little Man, which is about me being this little kid growing up. The grocery story I just gave you, and that became a wonderful children's book. The first one became NAACP Image Award nomination for Best Literature. So, to me, the exciting thing is when somebody tells me you can't do that, or when I haven't done it. That's what gets my juices running. It's like, wow, you can't do that. It's okay, good. Watch. So that's what really kind of gets me. So to go back and do something I've already done, that doesn't excite me. I get excited over doing the impossible.
When you get back to the East Coast and you walk through your old neighborhood, what thoughts come to you about the little boy who was, starting a business with shopping carts to the award-winning author, producer, director today? How do you reflect on that? What lessons do you pull from that journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. To be honest, I'm still processing it because I still feel like that little boy that's, had the shopping carts, because I've never had a job. I have that same passion. I get just as excited as I did back then, over doing a talent show or a block party or playing in front of 10 or 20,000 people, as a musician, or selling out an arena that had 20, 30,000 people in it. That is a Dave Wooley production. I get just as excited today as I did all of those years ago. I have a principle. I have what I call my 4 Ps: passion, purpose, perfection. And those are the things that, really have governed me. I look at the project and I say, am I passionate about it? Does this fit my purpose? And then I try to do the perfection part, because perfection is a lifelong journey. You never truly reach perfection, but it's a goal. So if I can, those P's kind of fit into what I'm thinking about doing, I know it's a pretty good thing to do. Then I'm all in.
What do you say to people who look at your resume and go, oh, well, Dave was just lucky. Like, he figured this out at 9. He pursued his goal. He's really done a good job. I haven't been sure about what I want to do. I don't know if I'm that talented. Undoubtedly, you've had some setbacks or maybe even some missteps. And so can you tell us about one or two of them and how you retraced your steps and how you were able to overcome whatever it was that was a challenge and learn from it and move on?
Well, first of all, it starts from a mindset. You can't let a setback set you back, because sometimes it's not even a setback. Sometimes it's a setup. You got to think of it kind of like a slingshot. You pull that thing back, you got to go backwards, and then God lets it go, and then you soar. But while you're going backwards, you think you're not, making progress. You think your life is in a slump, but really it's just setting you up for success. The key is not to give up, is to have perseverance and just keep believing in what you believe. I've had, everything I do, somebody tells me it's impossible, or you can't do that, or, that's not possible, or how are you going to do that? You've never done that before. Never did a book. Okay. All right. So I'm doing it now. This is my very first film, by the way. So, hey, I'm going to do it now. All of those were met with harsh resistance. I give credit to Dionne Warwick because she believed in me. She says, listen, any man that could raise 2 daughters, I know can do anything. So.
Amen.
You want to make a movie, you go ahead. About me too. That film was very difficult because when I went to the big platforms, you know who they are. They all turned me down, and I think I give a good pitch. I think I know how to pitch a story. I had some footage.
And you have a background, you have a record. Yeah.
And they were still saying no, because the model primarily is to do a documentary on somebody who has passed away. Just look at those documentaries. Nina Simone, Sidney Poitier, all of these great documentaries are people that are no longer with us. So they all told me that, that model doesn't work, and then they don't even want you to pass away like a year. They wanted to be 10 years after you pass away. So, to me, it was about, listen, this woman deserves to smell her roses in her lifetime. And you might not think there's a value to that, but I think there's a huge value to that. So I had to kind of single-handedly go on a mission to bring this into fruition and kind of will it into existence with, obviously a lot of prayer. But, everywhere I went, it was like, no, no, no. And then we were blessed to get into the Toronto International Film Festival, which is one of the largest film festivals. And then we won first runner-up out of 6,000 films or so that are submitted to that document. And then it premiered on CNN on New Year's Day, which they tell me is the largest viewing audience on New Year's because everybody partied New Year's Eve. So New Year's Day, they want to see.
They're not going anywhere the next day.
So it premiered at -- in terms of the Nielsen ratings.
Wow.
And then this is totally independent. So this was not done with CNN money or, I actually had to go knock on doors and use my own resources, to make this thing happen. And I had to use my own resources in terms of calling the people that are featured in this film. I mean, this has to be the only documentary I know that has a Snoop Dogg and a President Clinton in the same film, and it works, or Alicia Keys, or Carlos Santana, or you just mentioned, Olivia Newton-John, Gladys Knight, Quincy Jones. I mean, the list kind of goes on and on and on. All of what I've done to this point in my life prepared me to do this film.
And it's interesting that it is your first film. It's very well done. It's very engaging. I implore the audience to, they don't have a subscription to Max, get one to see this film. Because like I said, I follow a lot of music documentaries, and this one was just really interesting to learn who she is, to see how progressive she was, how political she was. There were a lot of things that I didn't know. I actually bought the book for my mom, so I didn't even realize that you were the co-author. I bought the book for my mom. I hadn't read it, but I really enjoyed the documentary. What was it like making sure that you were able to tell that full range of a story, like finding, getting people to talk about these very interesting moments. Even Dionne herself, like the one where she talked about, they had cussed out this waitress, and then she and I don't know if it was her cousin or her friend got back on the bus. The policeman stopped the bus, right? And Sam Cooke literally told her, don't say anything, because she was going to say, I'm the one who said this. And Sam Cooke really protected her and everyone on the bus by confronting the officer and asking the officer to leave the bus, which in those times was, that was really something. So, but you see a lot of that, right? You see a lot of her strength, her passion, and I don't want to say stubbornness, but she knows what she wants. She's a woman who's always known what she wants, and will stand up for the things that she believes are right. And so to be able to get her to talk about those things, but also to have all of the corroboration, right, from all of these amazing stars was, I imagine, a feat.
You know, what it took is trust. These are stories I've heard Dionne tell me over the years, you know, so she trusted me with her life, and her family trusted me, which I will be forever indebted, because to me, it's akin to drawing a picture or a painting or of somebody.
Right.
And then she gave me complete autonomy. And when it was finished, you know, and I screened it for him, obviously my palms were sweating because, as you said, she don't pull no punches. So if it was whack, she would just, yo, no, stop it right there. I don't need to see no more. That is not me. You know? So, you know, when we started watching it, I saw her light a cigarette. I was like, oh, okay, this is a good sign, you know. And then I heard her started laughing and enjoying it and sitting back and say, oh my God, when did you talk to Stevie Wonder? I didn't know you did that. When did you talk to Snoop? When'd you go to Quincy? So all of these interviews were done without her knowing.
Wow.
So that was the hardest feat, you know, and I would tell people after the interview, like, make sure you don't call her, don't tell her this is going to be a surprise. Imagine keeping a surprise for 5 years or so, you know, as I'm kind of accumulating these interviews. But, you know, that was, it took a tremendous amount of trust. But, you know, I knew the woman I wanted to share with the world is the same woman I, you know, go over and have dinner at our house, or that, you know, we've been on a plane and she tells me, hey, did I ever tell you the story about when I met with Suge Knight and Snoop Dogg at my house? What? Yes. When? She said, oh, it's about 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, oh no, you gotta be joking. So, you know, I knew these stories and I knew that people would resonate because they didn't know. And even Snoop, when I interviewed him for that, he had forgot about it initially. And then it just came to him. He said, oh my God, I remember that, you know? So, you know, I think people will get the authentic, the real Dionne Warwick. And I think all of those that contribute to it, because, you know, when you have a film like this, there's over 100 people that worked on this. So I need to give them all shots out and all thank you. Brilliant editor, Steve Perry, African-American guy out of LA. I mean, just everybody that worked. My daughters, Vita and Davina, associate producers. I mean, I can go down and name drops, etc. One of the things she said at the end, after she finished watching the screening, she looked at me and she said, Dave, you put your foot in that. You know what that means, right?
That is the ultimate compliment coming. That's a good compliment coming from anybody else, but that's the ultimate compliment coming from someone from Dionne Warwick. So you must feel very proud about that. And I understand why she said that, because anyone who sees that knows. Yeah, it was really, really well done. Not because you're sitting here. It was a really well done production. So so this must have whet your appetite for more like this.
Well, you know, maybe not quite like this. I'm excited to say next month, I'm going on tour with Dionne. We're going throughout Europe and UK, and it's called the Dionne Warwick Don't Make Me Over Tour, where she will be performing several of her, you know, classic hits, and we will be showing highlights of this documentary.
I can imagine, yes.
I'll be on stage interviewing her. So it'll be a completely different concept, but very interactive. So I'm really looking forward to that. We start the beginning of May. So that's new. You know, as I mentioned earlier, for me, it's about doing something. Life is real short. So anybody watching this, you know, you don't want to go through life regretting the risk that you didn't take. You know, so go for it, you know, and I never wanted to sit in a cubicle, you know, for 20 or 30 years and then retire. Yeah. So, you know, it's just my nature of just wanting to do something different. So, you know, I have a couple other projects in various, you know, different stages of development. One is the Dionne Warwick biopic, which I'm really elated and look forward to bringing that to fruition.
Oh, so you're going to be working on that as well.
Well, you know, again, there's quite a few things that are in various stages, but, you know, only God knows what's going to happen because, you know, it's just one of these things you just don't, especially in this industry, you don't know what's going to take off and what's not.
Right. So when you mentioned sitting in a cubicle, it triggered me to a conversation that I had today with two corporate women. One is she's been in banking for the last 40 years. It's totally stressed her out. And she's finally made up her mind that she's going to leave for a passion project of hers that's just in its infancy. And another woman who is running a medical spa business and is frustrated that the medical spa business is not growing, but it's because she's still very much tied to her corporate job. As we know, there are a lot of people who are still doing their moonlighting, their side hustles, and are just, afraid of taking that leap. And so what would you say to someone who is, like you said, life is short and, you don't want to regret not taking certain risks, but what would you instruct somebody to do who is really yearning for this opportunity to do something different, but is sitting scared because, they still got to pay rent and they still got to pay the car note and they still got to pay gas, electricity, and all of those things. And they're afraid to take the leap.
I would say, first of all, as you can tell, I'm a very spiritual man, so it starts sort of with this. But beyond that, you got to use common sense. You don't want to do anything that jeopardizes your livelihood, your family, keeping food on the table, keeping the lights on. But yet still, maybe there's a hybrid between the two. And then once your business takes on, then you can go into that full time. But you got to find that balance because, to go through life and not do something because you were. The number one killer of success is fear. I'll say it again. The number one killer of success is fear.
Yes.
and that's what you have to overcome. You have to overcome your own fear, and I understand it is scary, but you have to go out on a limb in order to get the fruit. So you cannot let that fear stop you. But often it does, and not only that, your surroundings, your people, your friends, your girlfriend, your boy, they'll instill their fear on you. Oh, you can't do that. Oh, no, why you want to do that? So then you guys, you got to surround yourself with people that are a lot of like mind as well. I think that really helps. And if you can't find it, then you just need to talk to yourself about this and keep these goals to yourself. But yeah, that's what I would tell them.
So are you on the social media platforms? If we want to stay in touch and find out what you're up to and what new endeavors you're taking on, where can we find you and where can we follow you?
Oh, absolutely. I'm on Facebook, Dave Wooley, Wooley. And then on IG, it's Dave_Wooley, Wooley. It's on Instagram. And that's enough for me, trust me, because I haven't figured out how to make money with that machine. To me, it's distraction from, staying focused. But it's a necessary a way to stay in touch with people. And I have met, some wonderful people that through those venues. But, I'm a big fan of this platform that you're on. So I'm just honored that you guys asked me to be on here because it really is a joy. It really, really is a joy. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you being here and sharing your insights and your wisdom and all of your gifts. And so I just want to, again, implore our audience to watch Dionne Warwick, Don't Make Me Over. It is on Max. And to pick up the book, for those of you who are reading books, to pick up Dionne Warwick's bestseller, of which Dave Wooley is a co-author, and it's called My Life as I See It. So thank you so much for being here. I'm looking forward to hearing about all of the other projects that are coming up and having you back to share more insights with us.
Oh, I would love to come back. This was so much fun. I've been looking for it. I was waiting all day for this. So you made my day. Trust me.
I'm so glad. Thank you.
Yeah. And remember, guys, follow your dreams. I know it sounds like a cliche, but you got to follow your dreams. Life is just way too short to go through it regretting the risk that you didn't take. So, don't give up. Don't give up.
I can tell you the older you get, those cliches don't sound like cliches anymore. No. They sound like imperatives. So
exactly. Just keep going. Just keep going.
Yeah.
And something will break. Something will break. Yes, the power of prayer is just amazing.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening. We'll be back again next week with another great guest. Take care.
The Business First podcast is hosted and produced by Sonia Alleyne. Executive producer Ken Johnson. Find the Business First podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Odyssey, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, TuneIn, or wherever you get your podcast. On social media on IG at business_first_podcast. Follow the Mean Old Line Media Podcast Network on IG at Mean Old Line Media. Get the Mean Old Line Media app in the App Store or Google Play. The Business First Podcast is a Mean Old Line Media production.